It's our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. And it was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought to us the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained by rational principles the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the gigantic Kingdom of England and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and he explained it in ways that were understandable to the people, to all the people, not just to the educated upper class. Because the desire for freedom is classless. The desire for freedom adheres in the human mind and in the human soul. Today we face another time of turmoil, of anger, and very, very serious partisan division. This is exactly the time we should consult our history. Look at what we've done best in the past and see if we can't use some of that to help us now. We understand that they created the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democracy, a country that has taken more people out of poverty than any other country on earth. They weren't perfect men and women, and neither are we. But a great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we're able to reason, we're able to talk, we're able to analyze. We are able to apply our God-given common sense. So let's do it. Today's episode, we're going to have a very, very interesting interview with a man who probably knows more about contemporary American politics than anyone, Steve Bannon, who was the strategist, the chief strategist for the Trump victory in 2016. He was the captain of the ship. He brought it home. Okay, we went back and forth a little on the sea. I think we built the ship on the sea.
Yeah.
But you brought it home for us.
You were on the bridge. You know, nobody really had the deck in the con, so it was.
But we got through it.
We got through it.
We got through it.
Kept off the shoals.
And he got elected, and we all thought he'd be a good president. But I'm just going to ask you this, and do you share with me the sense that even though we thought he'd be a good president, he's kind of exceeded what we
I think particularly he's, you and I used to talk about this a lot, because he came with no political experience, and his campaign was so revolutionary, the way he ran the campaign, went through all those great Republicans in the primary, and then won the presidency in a great come from behind against the Clinton apparatus and machine. He has grown. He's got his sea legs now. He's grown, right. I think, tremendously. He is now, I think, understands the office of the president. He understands the executive power of the president,
right.
And he understands, I think, how to take a team and drive them in a certain direction. So I think he's well overachieved where I thought he would be in his first term.
You picked up the rationale for his election, but you had known that rationale for years. I mean, you began seeing the disillusionment, the separation, what eventually became the deplorables, the condescending attitude of the elite. You were talking about it, writing about it long before Trump came along. How did you figure out?
It's simple.
That Trump was the vehicle. He seemed like he was somebody you were looking for.
Definitely, but it was easy to do it because I come from a Democratic family. I come from blue collar, Irish, Catholic, phone company, cops, firemen. Down in the port cities, we came into Baltimore, Boston, and Norfolk, Virginia is really our branch of the family. And so we're Kennedy Democrats. And I understood after having the opportunity after the Navy of going to places like Harvard and working at Goldman Sachs, that it was even people who have been middle class, is just a separation of kind of values, and that the deplorables, really the working class people, were getting left behind. And I kept saying somebody will come along that can give that voice, because right now, not in a room, not in a deal. And eventually Trump, I saw Trump early on. One of the first times I saw him was in the controversy around the mosque, around the 9/11, the downtown mosque. The mosque was built on 9/11. I actually went down and filmed it for a bunch of guys. 2003, 2004, or 5.
When was it?
That was early.
4 or 5.
Oh, 4 or 5. It's right after 9/11.
Yeah, yeah.
And they turned the mosque, and Trump, I think, put the money up or had a big controversy. There were a bunch of demonstrations down there. A couple of guys, I was making films at the time, maybe it was 5 or 6, but I went down for a couple of rallies, and on Saturday, and what I noticed is that union blue collar folks had packed the place. I said, hey, these people are working class Democrats, but they have a common sense of value. And so this could be a really big political revolution if people don't start to answer, start to really get to grips with where the country is. And so Trump, we were doing this populist nationalist thing, and then Trump, remember, people say he's from New York. He's from Queens.
Yeah, right? That's right. Absolutely.
And he had
a very good point.
He had his thing at WWE before. People say The Apprentice. I said, well, hey, he was in WWE before The Apprentice.
Right.
Trump, and you know how important this is. He speaks in a non-political vernacular, and he hits people right in the solar plexus.
Right.
He can connect with average people, and that's a gift you can't.
Well,
coach.
the thing that always amazed me is 4 years earlier we had a guy with a lot less money than him, Romney, a millionaire, but a guy with a lot less money, who couldn't make connection with common people. I mean, I took Mitt out to campaign the first time in the North End of Boston when he was running for governor. And after it was over, we both made a speech with a big Italian audience. I'm in the audience, I'm hugging people. My chief of staff, Tony Carbonetti, comes up and he punched me and says, Rick, he's still back there. He's still back there. So I go up to him, I said, Mitt, we're supposed to shake hands with the people.
This is what
and
he's
he
supposed
came
to
down
work.
and he did one of these. It was obvious he didn't have.
That plays in a North End Italian crowd.
Oh my God! By the time he was out of there, they said, let's look for other candidates.
Exactly.
All of a sudden, this guy comes along who almost should be alienated from the poor and the middle class, right? Rich, one of the richest people in the world, one of the most powerful, and he connects with them perfectly, seamlessly. So how did
because he gives a voice to the people that haven't had a voice. Those working class people, when you go to those rallies, when you see him on the campaign trail, he speaks about a handful of things that are quite important. Bringing manufacturing jobs back, the border, stopping mass illegal immigration, looking after the deplorables, these endless foreign wars. He's a strong national security president, but there's so many veterans, and remember, we focus in the upper Midwest on those counties that had the highest combat casualties. A couple of professors at Boston University actually did the analysis later, but Trump speaks to that and it resonates, and people realize he's not a phony. He's absolutely, and this is what the media never got about him. They thought it was all show. He deeply believes in this, and he connects with this audience, and that's why I think his movement's actually grown. He's taken over the Republican Party and turned it into a working class, really a working class, middle class party.
When you think of the State of the Union speech, it was so beautiful and it had so many themes. I think people missed the fact that about a third of it was Clinton triangulation at its best. He without knowing it, you could feel when Clinton did it, because it was somewhat phony about it. Basically, he took away all the Democratic issues. African Americans, Hispanic, women making more money now, more jobs. Answers the question, take a chance on me, which he used to ask during the campaign. I'm doing it a lot better than they are. They really have no issues to run against him except personality and these fake charges.
This gets to the impeachment. If you go to his inaugural address, everybody focuses on the American carnage. The whole speech is really a defense of the Westphalian system, is a defense of the nation state.
Right.
The most important line, I think, because we built the speech up when President Trump wrote it, is that he does a bunch of things of how he got in the situation, and then goes, now arrives the hour of action. Trump's not a talker. He's a man of action. He's a businessman. And if you look at all the action he's taken, that's what I loved about the State of the Union speech. State of the Union speech, instead of coming up like most of the presidents have, the very first line is, I'm here to report our union strong. He had an antiphon that went for almost 3 minutes.
Beautiful speech.
And he talked about actions. He talked about actions he had taken and the results. Actions he had taken and the results, and for the economy. And then about 3 minutes into the speech, he stops. And now I'm here to report our union's never been stronger. Very powerful. And then in each element, as you said, he broke out segments to really triangulate. It's a very sophisticated, as far as rhetoric goes, and the structure of it.
And getting better.
And getting better. It was just very powerful.
From the beginning to now, I mean, he's always good, but now it's
He's owning these speeches, and you can tell his hands becoming more, even the structure of them. So but here's the thing. I think Nancy Pelosi did what a smart, savvy politician would do. When they ran to take the House, they told these people the first thing we're going to do is impeach him. They don't have the personalities on the stage to beat him, right? They don't have big personalities. They also don't have a set of policy prescriptions,
right?
Because you just mentioned, he triangulated them. Tell me where the policies are. So he's taken away the policies. He's taken away. There's all these small personalities, not that can fill up a room like Trump, not like an Obama, right? So what do you have to do? I think there's strategy, and I think Nancy Pelosi understood early on. I've got to go destroy him. I've got to use the apparatus of the House to go after this guy. The Mueller investigation didn't work,
and they were hoping that one of these would hit pay dirt, that they'd actually get a real crime or a real.
Yes, or just as you know, being a prosecutor. Just the war of attrition. It starts to wear people down. People start to make mistakes. The staff gets smaller. Their thing was to keep him totally engulfed in legal efforts and impeachments and all these investigations, so he didn't have time to do the actions. That's what's so powerful. The week of the impeachment, he rolls out the Middle East peace plan. He has Ivanka's, the human trafficking, right? Kellyanne does the opioid situation, which the deaths are dropping. Peter Navarro does the counterfeit situation. He signs USMCA, which is a geostrategic, and Brexit gets done that night. That if he hadn't have been president, Brexit would have never gotten done because he had the British back. Oh, and by the way, on Friday afternoon, he rolls out the pandemic situation. There's 7 major things, and as you know, how many months in planning that takes to get to fruition. That's where you're seeing the flower now of the actions that he's taken, and that's where the Democrats understand they're jammed.
Right. Yeah. There's no one with that capacity. Look at what he did to Hillary. He wore her down to the point where she collapsed on 9/11. They had to push her in the car.
And she's tough as boot leather. And you beat the Clinton apparatus. You know how tough they are.
I don't.
And they don't play by the Marquis of Queensberry's rules.
And now this would be a perfect time to take a short break. For those of you who know me, in addition to law and politics, I'm passionate about the Yankees, baseball, football, all sports to watch, golf to play, history to read, opera, classical music to listen to and watch, and cigars to relax and socialize. And I have definite opinions on the best cigars for the right time and the right place. And you'll hear about that too. But the revolution in cigars took place in the 1990s. Most cigars then were machine-made with foreign ingredients. Now it's just the opposite. Most are hecho a mano, man-made, all organic, natural, and premium. The revolution was led by one man and one man alone, Marvin Shanken, and Cigar Aficionado magazine. Marvin had been rating wines quite successfully for Wine Spectator magazine, and he brought the rating system to cigars. The first cigars rated in the 90s were gone in a flash. Even now, the first thing I do when I get my magazine is I go right to the ratings page. Here it is. 93, 91. Oh yeah, I'll go for that one. Then there'll be 94. Whew, 92. Problem is you got to get there fast because they go fast. This revolutionized the cigar industry and quality rose to the top. Then there's the Cigar of the Year. Try to get them as fast as possible because they're gone pretty quick. This magazine revolutionized the industry. And I'll tell you what, this month is Cigar of the Year. Cigar of the Year. What are these for? Cigar of the Year. You better get this magazine quick because these cigars are going to be gone very, very quickly. Go to the link on our website and order it. And you'll be able to get down to your cigar store and get to smoke a few of these, and you let me know which ones you like better, because we can have a really good conversation about it. Sometimes I do agree with Marvin, and when I don't, I let my opinion be known, and Marvin usually says, stick to the law. Also, along with rated cigars, there are articles on politics, sports, interesting profiles, and Marvin also has Wine Spectator, Spirit Advocate. If you like wine, if you like scotch, if you like bourbon, if you like rye, if you like vodka, if you like gin, they're the magazines for you. And you know what? Subscribe to Cigar Aficionado right now through the link on our website. Welcome back. So what do you think is the deciding, let's look forward based on your extraordinary experience from the past. So what should we be looking for? What on
here's
on
what I think.
Trump
Here's
side? What does he have to run on? How do they run against him?
Here's what I think is extraordinary is that having gone through 3 years now of the president is a clear and present danger. This is what the House and the Democrats say. He's a clear and present danger and must be impeached before Christmas for the simple reason of these Russian oligarchs. They're now going to turn,
right.
And this is where I'm going to turn the thing now, interview you, because he's now going to turn to an American oligarch to destroy Donald Trump, and that's Michael Bloomberg. They're going to turn to Michael Bloomberg's billions of dollars to try to go and destroy Donald Trump. They couldn't use they tried to use the official apparatus of the FBI, of special counsels, of the Justice Department, and now and then they used the impeachment process. They failed there, and you saw every different angle of that. And now I think they're now running to, they realize that Bernie and Klobuchar and Mayor Pete, all these people are just not going to be able to stand up to him.
Mike is a friend of mine. I endorsed Mike. There are people that would tell you that my
you endorsed Bloomberg 3 times.
I endorsed Bloomberg 3 times, and I endorsed Trump once, but he only ran once. And Trump endorsed me 3 times. So we have a cross endorsement policy going on. I thought Bloomberg, if he ran against him in 2016, he'd have been a tougher candidate because Trump wouldn't have his record, and Bloomberg had a record. But now, I'm in a particularly unusually good position to assess both records because I held his job. He succeeded me, and of course, I've watched the president very closely.
And you also rode shotgun on the campaign.
So Trump, in his first 3 years as president, was more like I was in my first 3 years as mayor. He was an agent of reform. I cut the city budget by 20%. I laid off 27,000 people. I had demonstrations every day.
Oh, do I remember?
I required welfare workers to work if you want it. Otherwise, you don't get your welfare. Children who were going to schools like colleges for free, I'd say you're going to have to put in a little tuition. You have to work.
This is at City College?
Yeah, and I would go tell them, I'm doing you a favor because I'm teaching you the work ethic. I love you more.
Right.
I care about you more. I got rid of the homeless people.
But you cleaned up as I remember, you cleaned up the city and the crime. The broken windows policy. You came in.
Broken windows policy, but it was real turmoil the first 2 years. There was no way I was getting reelected. Then I got lucky. It all worked.
That's not luck.
By 90, well.
You had the guts to stick with
by 96,
you had the guts to
by
stick with
96, it all turned around. Mike was a good mayor, but he was a caretaker mayor. Mike did not do any reforms anywhere near as significant as those. Did he carry forward the reforms correctly? Yes. He did a good job carrying forward the reforms on crime in particular.
Now let me ask you, because
I'm shocked that he doesn't believe that.
He's blaming you now for stop and frisk.
I talked him into it.
He's blaming you for stop and frisk.
He's blaming me.
Let's talk about stop and frisk. What the concept was, what it was under Mayor Giuliani, what it became under Mike Bloomberg.
And Mike, unfortunately, used it to excess. I had the same challenge by the Justice Department when I was the mayor, that it was a violation of the civil rights law.
And how many stops did you have?
100,000.
Bernie Kerik was your last.
Bernie Kerik was my last commissioner. We went down to the Justice Department, and I argued the case myself, not my corporation counsel, to Janet Reno and Eric Holder. And I said, you don't have the basis for a civil rights case.
Eric Holder was head of the Civil Rights Division.
We stopped 100,000 people. Yep. I can show you probable cause for each one of them. It's 100,000 you have time for. I can show you our success rate of about 55%.
Success rate being
55% of the time we got a gun or a knife.
Half of the stops had a gun or a knife.
You know what? Now, and the Eastern District of New York wanted to bring a civil rights case against us, and Eric Holder overruled them. He said, "You don't have a case. Giuliani's right." there's not a civil rights violation. Fast forward now.
And he was a pretty aggressive.
Yes.
Ran the civil rights division pretty aggressively.
Fast forward 7 years later, the statistics change. 600 stop and frisk, 6 times more.
Hang on, Mayor. How do you go to 100? How do you go from 100,000 to 600,000?
That's because it became.
He had a pretty good commissioner, Ray Kelly, right?
Ray Kelly's a great commissioner,
yeah.
But it was the only way to really keep crime going down. Crime had been squeezed down so much. The concept, and Mike expresses it on a bootleg tape that I heard the other day. Bloomberg expresses it. Basically says he wants everybody in those neighborhoods to be afraid to go out and carry a gun. So if they think there's a really good chance they're going to get searched, they're not going to carry a gun. And the only way there's a really good chance they're going to be searched is if you do a lot of searches. So at least they keep the gun at home, and you got the gun out of circulation.
At 100,000, Holders, a pretty aggressive ran the Civil Rights Division, says it's not unconstitutional.
Yeah, not only that, yeah.
At 600,000.
We also had better statistics because when you get up to 600,000, you make a lot of mistakes. A lot of times they didn't have probable cause down. A lot of times it wasn't described the right way, so the cop was just guessing. If you keep it tighter and better disciplined, and we only used our more experienced cops for that. Since they had to expand it out to 600,000, they started to use a lot of the rookies who don't know how to really put together a good probable cause justification. The second thing that we showed was, when you first look at it, it sounds terrible. African Americans make up only 23% of the city, and 70% of the people stopped are African American. Why is that? That seems to be almost discriminatory on its face. Well, African Americans commit 76% of the murders in New York City, and many of the other violent crimes. So,
but did the crime in the African American neighborhoods drop dramatically because of stop and frisk?
Yeah, but what happens is we didn't select African Americans; they selected themselves by committing the murder. Right? So when the police have their lineup in the morning, and the sergeant's got the people to look for, he says, "Oh, 2 murders last night. One was an African American." So you go look for an African American. They're the ones who created the statistics. It wasn't that we said, "Oh, we're going to go after 7 out of 10." They created it by the crime that they were committing. And here's the most important thing. Almost 70 to 80% of the people they killed were African Americans. So when you take them off the street, whose lives are you saving?
Did you have the types of complaints from the neighborhoods where the crimes were going down?
We got thank yous from the neighborhoods. Thank you, you're getting Joey the drug dealer off the street finally.
Because in Bloomberg's, I think, second or third term, they did start getting a tremendous amount of complaints from the neighborhood.
Because if you do 600, our rate was 55%. So we got 45% of the people angry. But maybe if they saw that we were at 55%, they wouldn't be as angry.
Well, you're saying at 600,000 at 10% is still the same 55,000. It's the same absolute number.
But
yeah, it's just but you
if they're only right on 60,000, that's 540,000 people.
Would you have reeled that in? Was that a mistake? Did Ray Kelly and Bloomberg make a mistake? You think?
It should have been
Ray Kelly, a great cop, and Bloomberg.
Everybody makes mistakes. I've made them. I defended the law. I wrote an amicus brief, but I always felt that was a vulnerability, because all of a sudden, if you have a success rate of only 10% and a failure rate of 90%, and you're up in the numbers like 500,000 people stopped who didn't commit a crime, even a not so liberal judge can get kind of concerned.
You know both men. Is Bloomberg doing this as a vendetta? Is there something about Trump that triggers him? I was shocked, and I know you were, because you and I talked about it, because you knew the guy, when he came and gave that kind of vicious speech.
Totally shocked. Out of character.
You know the guy, so he'd never done anything like that before.
So I was not shocked when Mike wanted to run for president. When I ran for president, Mike explored running for president. And in fact, I thought his little team was responsible for putting out some of the negative stuff about me because they felt there wouldn't be room for two New York mayors. But I understood it. And Mike, when I first met Mike and asked him why he was running for mayor, he said to me, there are only 3 things I want to be now. One is mayor, the other would be head of the World Bank, and the third, of course, would be president. So this has been on his mind for some time. So I don't think
he said this back to you when?
Gosh, that would have been in 1999.
Okay,
2000.
so this is 20 years.
There's a long time in his head.
Because he wasn't even in New York City, he was never one of those big prominent business guys. He had a business, very successful, but he wasn't like a
He
dominant.
was not a socialite. He wasn't.
It wasn't a dominant business figure.
He wasn't in the groups like the Partnership. It wasn't a big deal in that. He wasn't people pushing a political agenda. Didn't seem particularly involved in politics like some other business people who have a great interest in politics. But he decided to run. He had the money. He was determined to do it. And I think that he's had it on his mind that this is a job that he wants. So in 2006, 2007...
Your endorsement, actually, people argue, was one of the things that made him mayor.
I think it was. I mean,
given all the accolades you got after 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, it was if you're going to get an endorsement from me, that's the best time to get it.
That was time. We were at peak Rudy.
Right, that was it. Never going to be that good or bad. But the fact is that this has been something on his mind. I mean, he thought about running in 07, made some real serious efforts, 08.
But this guy's a moderate or liberal kind of Rockefeller Republican, Wall Street Republican. What triggered him to go on the stage of the Democratic convention and to really be very personal? Because in his campaigns, he never went after his opponents. He never went at his opponents personally.
When he was speaking at the convention, I think before, and I told the president, then Donald, and he's agreed. He'll be okay. We're friends. The president felt they were friends. If they weren't friends, they were not enemies. I mean, they didn't have like big fights over anything. I don't ever remember Donald Trump as a private citizen complaining about Mayor Koch. They weren't close like we were, but they weren't. So I wish, and Mike in his conversations,
he never came to you and said anything about Bloomberg the entire time he was mayor.
Never, during the time he was mayor, he never said anything about Bloomberg. And more importantly, the campaign was going on for some time then. I must have saw him 4 or 5 times. I was working on the campaign. I would have thought he would have come to me and said, "Rudy, I think you're making a mistake working with him. He's a horrible person." And all of a sudden we get a speech that's like he's the devil.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was. I think it was contrived. I don't think he believes it.
You don't think he believes it?
No, I don't think he believes it. He's a rational man. He doesn't believe that stuff. But it plays well, and he played it out. And I think the
did he change the makeup? Look, listen. When you ran for mayor, there was a law, as you told me, $10 million cap. This is a guy that comes in to run for mayor and is putting $200 and $300 million into campaigns in the city to become mayor.
He did a lot of things that have been looked at, and I guess nothing's ever come of it. But I mean, all kinds of rules that you implicate when you spend $100 million. I mean, it's remarkable. He spent $100 million on the first campaign, $100 million on the second, and $100 million on the third. In the third campaign, he only won by 3%.
Yeah. And
the other guy spent $9 million. So the spending of money,
10 times more than you spent.
Yeah, I mean,
look, Sheldon Adelson the other day, one of the, you know very well, one of the closest supporters of the president, announced he's putting in $100 million in various groups to support the president. In any other time, that would be a number that would be unfathomable. Bloomberg's committed $2 billion, and from the time I said a year and a half ago that Bloomberg's going to be a major factor, if not run in this, and probably run, his net worth's gone from $58 billion to 70. Forbes just marked the market to $71 billion. He's had an increase of $12, $13 billion in the 18 months. He's committed $2 billion if he's not the candidate. What that type of capital applied to his data operation and his organization? How do you fight back?
I mean, I think he has a lot of strong parts to his arsenal. He's got the money. He's got the staff. He can buy whatever staff he needs. He's got the major newspapers who will let him get away with anything. You know, they criticize Trump for the Trump brand being increased. The Bloomberg brand grew about 8 or 10 times while he was the mayor.
If Trump had a major,
nobody ever raised that.
If Trump owned a major news operation, and Trump had told him, "You can't cover me and say anything negative about it," the NBC and CBS and the New York Times and what would melt down.
Right. Here,
Bloomberg does it, and it's not even crickets.
Well, that gets me to something else that bothers the heck out of me: the double standard. How is it that can happen? How is it that Joe Biden can get up and say, "I pressured the president of Ukraine to fire the prosecutor," and they can allege with a whistleblower who turns out to be wrong, that Donald Trump pressured the president of the Ukraine to investigate Biden. One becomes 1,000 headlines of bribery. It leads to a congressional investigation and an impeachment where he was finally acquitted.
Because we have a different.
The other, nobody's even investigating.
No, but here,
aren't they the same thing?
But it's absolutely the same thing. But here's what has to happen, I believe, because I think this is a crisis of American governance. And it's just like the CIA and the FBI in the 50s, 60s, and the 70s. You had the Church Commission, excesses, whether it's the overseas, the Kennedy assassination, Vietnam, the Watergate. People decided it was time to actually hold this accountable. They had open hearings. It led to many reforms. The whole Gang of Eight and everything that's done today on the intelligence side, as you know, all came out of that. You've seen the FBI, you've seen the CIA, you've got Crossfire Hurricane, you have all the issues you've brought up, you've got evidence that you now have. This is why I'm advocating. It has to be a formal setting. The New York Times, as much strong as this podcast is, or the radio show that we do, or Fox News, or you're on Jesse.
And by the way, it is a great radio show. I love being on it.
Well, thank you. I
it's my favorite radio. Anytime you want me on, I'll get up.
I appreciate it. Well, you're a great interview, so it's
love to be on it because you guys really get into. We
get to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, you do.
Because Jason, as you know, we got Jason Rahim. I got some real veterans. So.
Yeah.
But you need a formal setting. The one thing that struck me in this entire impeachment process, when the president's team finally got up there, after literally all the Mueller investigation and all the beat down this, and they finally got up there and they were able for the first 2 hours on Saturday just to walk through a logical progression of what the air kind of came out of CNN and MSNBC. And I said, for the first time, this is what I told Jesse the other night. Jesse did an 8-minute opening on a show and says, hey, I do it for a living. And by the way, in the war room, we had a whole staff of people, and we're sitting there going, we could see actually interlinking connections that we hadn't quite gotten. That's why with what you've done and with what Devin Nunes did on the House Intelligence Committee, the 40 subpoenas, your investigations, to me, it's time now that it can't be in the media. Because you need a formal setting. I believe that the right venue for that is to start Lindsey Graham's Judiciary Committee in the Senate. And just to start. And you told me something long ago. You said the power of kind of English common law in our American system is the cross-examination.
Right.
That anybody can talk smack about somebody.
Right.
But it's when you get them under oath and you can cross them, there's where the truth comes out. For 3 years, Donald Trump has had unmitigated people talk smack about him. Nobody's ever been crossed. This is why I think, and I tell people, I said, hey, Rudy will take 3 days up there. He'll have his charts, he'll have his memos.
Cross-examine me.
And they'll cross-examine. They'll get these tough guys, Goldman and these guys, and the mayor will be crossed.
I am very, very insulted and feel hurt by the fact that these people constantly say, the Russians gave me this information. This is a Russian plot. I keep thinking, how could they be so stupid? Did the Russians tell Joe Biden to say, fire the prosecutor? Did they go into his head and say, fire the prosecutor? Did the Russians get the $8 million that was laundered to Hunter Biden? Did a Russian get that? Did the Russians get Zlochevsky case dropped so Zlochevsky could come back and keep his $5 billion and his crooked company?
Let me ask you. I can ask this
These
question.
are things that were done by Americans and Ukrainians, not Russians.
People that are in generations younger than me, they know you as America's mayor. 9/11, you're political. You run for president. You're associated with President Trump. You supported him. They don't remember when I got here out of the Navy and Harvard before you were mayor. You were really Elliot Ness. You broke the five families. You actually, if you've seen the Godfather movies, you broke the five families, the mafia, and then you turned. I was at Goldman. The corruption on Wall Street, you went right from that, and you essentially broke the illegal mafia that was Ivan Boesky and the insider trading ring and all that, and sent these guys to jail. It's really stunning and made you obviously an international figure. With your expertise as I keep telling them, I said, this is probably the greatest prosecutor we've ever had. When you look at the detail and the information you've seen, and you're saying, hey, I'm gonna present it, and you're gonna cross me. Do you think that the information you has rates at the level of the five families and the insider trading on Wall Street, of the level of depth of evidence as a prosecutor that you have?
Yes, I believe I have. I think I have certainly on the Ukraine, where I've been able to check everything out. there's a very clear 2 bribery, 1 money laundering count. The 2 bribes being Zlochevsky bribed Biden with Hunter's job to protect him if his company was ever taken away from him.
Wow.
Biden then did it. Biden did it, protected the company by threatening, extorting, or bribing Poroshenko.
Now, you're saying,
and then the money comes back as money laundered
But my
money.
point is that this everybody confuses it with 2020. What about 2020? You're saying, you as one of the greatest prosecutors we've ever had, U.S. attorneys, you believe you have evidence that can show a sitting vice president.
Yeah, that's pretty serious.
In an administration that prided themselves on no crony capitalism and no corruption, and never had a glove laid on them at the time. You think you can show at least 2 bribery counts and 1 money laundering count?
Correct. One of the bribery counts I don't have to show. One of the bribery counts comes right out of his big mouth when he says the following: I pressured the president of the Ukraine to drop the case, to drop the prosecutor general, and fill in the fact that everyone in the world knew that the prosecutor general was investigating his son. And if Joe didn't know it, it was in the newspapers. It's totally absurd that he didn't know it. And there are witnesses, 5 of them, that can establish that Joe is lying about that and that he knew that his son, Zlochevsky, the son's boss, and the company were under investigation. It's a tight little bribery case. But then for me, I would go bigger. I would think about, but I haven't investigated these other 2 yet.
You would use RICO statutes?
I would make it.
See, people don't understand. You use RICO as to take down the 5 families, and you use RICO to break Wall Street.
I use RICO against the Koch administration for public corruption. I used it against the Reagan administration for WedTech, in which unfortunately I had to ask for a special counsel for my boss, Ed Meese, who I knew was innocent, but that stupid law didn't allow me to exonerate him. So how would you do the RICO case? RICO is very simple. It means the business of crime. So what's the Biden business of crime? The Bidens learned way back in the 70s and 80s when he was a senator how to monetize his public office.
He's supposed to be clean as a house too. It's supposed to be no corruption of Joe Biden.
Joe
Biden's not particularly bright. Not particularly bright, but he's honest. He's honest. He's
the day is long.
Day is long.
I thought that
middle class Joe.
Then I have.
You're shocking me, Mayor.
I have a file called the Biden family. It goes back to the 70s when they were getting insurance contracts, where the kid went to work for a bank, and Joe all of a sudden started taking positions that were totally inconsistent with Democratic positions, trying to make bankruptcy very, very hard. We have the brother getting contracts for companies that Joe helped.
Joe Biden's brother.
There are articles all throughout criticizing Joe for having very loose lobbying practices. And then there are things that are caught where they're putting together like a private equity fund, and the brother and the son say Joe will help get us our customers with his influence, and that's in the newspapers. Joe is asked, "Do you know about it?" Joe says no, but they never follow it up. You've got about 8 answers from Joe faced with serious unethical or criminal problems on the part of his family, saying, "I don't know my family's business," which is like Kate Corleone in The Godfather. I don't know my family's business. By the time somebody comes to you the 3rd time and says, your brother James just got 1/3 of a $1.5 billion contract in Iraq, 4 days after you were named the point man in Iraq, and your answer to that is, gee, I don't know my brother's business. All of a sudden that becomes reckless disregard for the truth, and you can prove intent.
And you're saying, look, this proves the point. It wasn't about the politics of 2020. You're saying that this needs to be done because it was the office of the vice president, and even as he's a senator, that this type of crony capitalism, this type of corruption is the thing that's got to be vetted. This is why people have lost faith in the system.
Absolutely. Yeah, this began very simply as the Ukrainians came to me. They said, we have a lot of evidence of collusion and corruption by Democrats.
Can you trust anything out of the Ukraine?
Pardon me?
Can you trust anything? That's the new meme. Can you trust anything out of the Ukraine?
No, but you got to corroborate it. So I didn't trust it. They told me that. I didn't believe it. I said, I'm going to go talk to the witnesses myself. So I went and talked to Shokin. I interviewed him. I have the tape of that interview. I went to talk to Lutsenko. He misled me on some things. I discarded them. I went to talk to Kulyk, who's probably the straightest of them all, because he's sort of the Inspector Javert, the guy who really knows the case. They helped me a lot by showing me documents. I have a document that I've talked to you about on the radio that shows straight out money laundering, 100%.
This is Latvia?
It doesn't come from Ukraine, it comes from Latvia. I have documents that come from the United States that show money laundering. And most of all, I have Joe Biden.
Are you afraid that if it's a talk now that maybe Durham or maybe the Justice Department, are you afraid that if it gets caught up in there, and there's things in the paper, they're having meetings with you or seeing that it's years from now that anything happens, but that if you have hearings in front of the nation on national TV, you're able to present this, and then people can cross you and bring in other evidence. But that's what's needed to bring it in front of the American people instead of going right into the legal system? I guess
with my prosecutorial background, I always favor prosecutions. But this is something where the public has a right to know, because as the president says, it shouldn't happen again. And every once in a while, we let things go so far in Washington that it really deteriorates, and it needs a reform period.
Do you think we need a reform period?
Darn right. This is political. That was religious. I feel like we need a Protestant.
You're a Protestant Reformation.
Protestant Reformation, yeah.
You're a law and order guy and you're a national security guy. Does the FBI's activities, both individuals and maybe even the institutions, need to be fully vetted, reviewed, and reformed?
The FBI needs a Knapp Commission. What was the Knapp Commission? The Knapp Commission was a commission that Mayor Lindsay and Judge Whitman Knapp put together mid-'70s because there was rampant corruption in the police department. And I prosecuted 70 of the police officers that came out of that.
You prosecuted actually NYPD.
NYPD. I broke my heart. For
kickbacks, for corruption?
For taking drugs, selling drugs. Four of my uncles were police officers, 2 of my cousins. I grew up in a police officer family. And those were the hardest cases for me to bring. And some of them were my age, the cops were my age.
And they came out of the Knapp Commission?
Of the Knapp Commission. They worked for the Special Investigations Unit. There are 2 good movies, if you want to see it, Serpico and Prince of the City. Yep. And I'm a character in Prince of the City. I think that's where I learned a lot about corruption. If you let a little bit of happen, it's like the broken windows theory. You let a little bit of happen, it grows and it grows and it grows, and then you get beyond the pig factor, which is essentially what happened with Bloomberg, where at 100,000 you can defend it. At 600,000,
not defensible.
You're getting out of hand.
You believe that the FBI, and you're a law and order guy, you worked at the Justice Department, the U.S. Attorney, you kind of revere the institution of the FBI. You think right now the FBI needs a Knapp Commission to review its practices?
But a little bit easier than the Knapp Commission, just the upper echelon. I spent 2 weeks ago with a group of field agents. They're just the same as the field agents I work with, just as honest. Just as disgusted with headquarters as you and I are.
Why? Because it's become politicized? The upper reaches become politicized?
They see how the case was fixed. That disgusted them. The Hillary case was clearly fixed.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about the way it was conducted. So in the case of Donald Trump, every single one of the people around him that any thought they'd have evidence gets prosecuted. They create cases against Flynn. They go out and create the case against Manafort. It had been declined 2 years earlier. And they go make up a phony black book to get him indicted.
From the Ukraine.
The case against Roger Stone.
It's ridiculous.
Is a case about exaggerating.
Exactly.
We all know that Roger exaggerates.
The bullshit artist being prosecuted for bullshitting.
Meanwhile,
it's ridiculous.
Meanwhile, all these people around Hillary, where she got rid of 33,000 emails, bleach bit, smashed up phones, none of those people were prosecuted. Nobody tried to turn them. I mean, they had Manafort in solitary confinement for 7 months, torturing the guy to try to get him to say he was the connection to Russia. And credit to him, he didn't say it because it wasn't true. They attempted the same thing with Jerome Corsi, which we caught them at. They're trying to give him a script to read from. And nobody tried that with Hillary.
General Flynn?
Everybody got it. If it were a Hillary investigation, General Flynn would have gotten immunity.
What about the summer? What about the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, the 40 subpoenas, Crossfire Hurricane, maybe potential other intelligence agencies? Doesn't all that have to come out? And the only way to do that is some formal setting. You can't go. My point is, there's not enough Fox specials. You make a very good case. There's not enough Fox specials. Not enough War Room podcasts. There's not enough things. They're all fine. Don't get me wrong.
I'm just doing it because I'm frustrated.
Right. But the Republicans hold the Senate. This must happen. See, President Trump, I think, says something that's very powerful. It's not even about him. This is about the office of the president. This can never happen to another president. And if we've allowed it to happen to Trump, unless we go Lance the Boyle, if AOC is president in 10 or 12 years, her turn in the barrel's coming, right?
But does the Senate have it? Can the Senate go after a former senator? I've tried to get the Senate to get involved in this at a very early stage. And if they did, I wouldn't be involved in this at all. I investigated
Isn't that, but look, I know you know
That's
Roman.
part of the
I know you
swamp.
know Roman. It's
That's
even
part of the swamp.
it's worse than that. This is how the Roman Republic fell.
Yes.
The Roman Senate got that corrupt.
Right.
That they wouldn't go after senators. They're supposed to represent their states and their people. To say they'll never go after another senator is how in the Roman Republic it got so corrupt. Eventually, someone like Caesar came along, right? A dictator came along that had to clear it out because it got so corrupt because they wouldn't go after each other and all the corruption. That's where we are today. When you make this statement, which is true, and Washington said they're never going to bring Biden up because it's a club. You know, it's the most exclusive club in the world. Isn't that part of the problem? Isn't it the core of draining the? You have to drain. If you're going to say you drain the swamp,
it's the core of the double standard. It's the core of draining the swamp. If you just think about this, in January of 2018, all these geniuses on the Council of Foreign Relations were sitting there when Joe Biden got up and in 2 sentences said, basically could have said, I violated the bribery statute. I told that guy, if you don't fire the prosecutor, I told the president of Ukraine, you're not getting your money, and you got 6 hours to do it. The crime of bribery, offering something of value or threatening in exchange for official action. And when the words like that were attributed to Trump, within minutes, there are headlines all over the world. Trump commits bribery.
Quid pro quo.
Biden says same thing.
Right.
Council on Foreign Relations asleep. The press asleep. No one's saying it's inherently unusual for a vice president or president to have a prosecutor of another country fired. That's a rather unusual fact. And am I going to buy this corrupt? He was just corrupt. There are a lot more corrupt people in Ukraine than Mr. Shokin. I mean, his friend Poroshenko was taking billions. Or Viktor Pinchuk, who was giving Hillary more money than anyone else. I mean, those are people you might have taken a look at. So maybe you would say, maybe there's another motive here. Let me Google it. And if you Googled it, the first thing that would have come up is a 2015 article in the Times that raises the question of this terrible conflict that his son had in working for the most crooked company, and even a Times reporter would put that together. But for some reason, we're in this dual standard, and the law, look, to try to get you and me, they'd go squeeze 10 people alive.
Oh, big time. They tried that.
Whereas they're trying it with me. And it's not going to happen, but they're trying it with me. Whereas with these guys, this guy, there's been an outstanding case of bribery against him now for 2 years. And everybody's afraid to investigate it.
But here's my point.
If they investigated it 2 years ago, there'd have been none of this presidential stuff.
We're in February, exactly, because you were done it about his time as vice president. We're in February of 2020. We're 8 months away. We're 264 days in a wake-up from Election Day. It'll play into the 2020. What advice would you give the president? What you think legitimate actions should be taken to defend the office of the president from this ever happening again?
Well, I think the president is going to have to sit down with some of the loyal members in Congress and see if we can pass some laws to prevent something like this from happening, tightening it up, getting more approvals.
But the Democrats are never going to work with him on passing laws on
just maybe we'll get a Republican House. What do you think?
And then if you got a Republican House, what would you do?
I think it could pass some laws that would restrict the way congressional investigations take place. Also, Congress has gone, I wrote this brief, we never had to use it because we never had to fight their subpoenas because they were too cowardly to fight with us over subpoenas because we would have kicked their you-know-what. But the congressional subpoena power has now been drafted so wide, they're taking over the entire government. And they don't even feel that they can be challenged in court.
I thought the framers wanted investigations to be in the House. You're saying that this has been abused or metastasized?
No, they want it in the House, but they want proper investigations in the House, and they don't want them to take over for you.
What's improper about their subpoena power today?
You don't serve.
Why do you say it's grown?
You don't, because they serve like 1,000 subpoenas. They had 6 committees investigating the same thing. That's inherently.
Is your problem with that? Is your problem that the Republicans under Paul Ryan, we didn't do it We didn't do it smartly.
We didn't do anything.
The subpoenas that went to Rosenstein just sat there. There are 40 subpoenas that could have broken this thing wide open. It just sat there, and people continue to talk the president out of it for a whole host of bogus reasons.
Correct.
Is it the fact that the Republicans don't use it well enough and the Democrats do, or
It's
you
the
think
fact
that
that
overall it's out of balance?
How about somewhere in the middle?
Okay.
Republicans seem not to use it well.
Why is that?
The Senate doesn't use it at all.
But why is
the House,
that?
The House,
Are they cowards?
The House was trying to use it well, and one man stopped them. I think if you let those guys like Devin Nunes and Jordan and Meadows, you let them free, this thing wouldn't have happened if Ryan hasn't sat on them. The Senate has this Senate thing.
Why did Paul Ryan sit on it?
You have to ask Paul Ryan that. I don't know. Maybe he didn't believe it.
But he had smart people around him, like
should have
Devin
known.
Nunes, like Jim Jordan,
Yeah,
like
he should have
others.
Mark
Meadows.
He should have trusted them. Well, we're getting near the end.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me. I think it's down. Got to get your political handicapping. I think it's down to 4 Democratic candidates. What about you? Who do you?
It's down to one candidate. It's Bloomberg versus Trump. You're going to be in the middle of this. Bloomberg will either himself be candidate, or he'll be the overlord. Tell me
what that means.
He's doing a leverage buyout of the Democratic Party. He's going to put $2 to $5 billion in 8 months. Rudy, you've had to go around and shake the hands to raise that kind of money. Sheldon Adelson commits $100 million.
It's nothing.
It's nothing. The most has ever been committed to a presidential election, I think, by an individual. It gets an asterisk in Politico. Here's my point. Quantity has a quality all its own. This is very dangerous because of Barack Obama's financial policies in the bail and what happened in flooding the zone with liquidity at the Federal Reserve after the financial crisis of 2008 made Michael Bloomberg and others oligarchs. We've had wealthy people in this country forever. Right. We've had the golden age. And look, you've been mayor of New York City. You've had to deal with billionaires and multi-billionaires.
Absolutely.
This is something different.
Yep.
Michael Bloomberg is an oligarch. Like an oligarch, he's there. He's a moderate to slightly liberal Republican mayor of New York City. Okay? He is doing not a hostile takeover. He's doing a leverage buyout of the Democratic Party. He will either be the candidate, or in all likelihood, I think, because of his lack of interpersonal skills, maybe not be the candidate, but he will have a candidate. One of those will be an issue. He's already said with Bernie, he'll take Bernie if he has to. I happen to believe, and I've said this, that Hillary Clinton will ride in after he drops a $250 million bomb on Super Tuesday. Remember, as of today, he's going to get close to $400 million already. He spent $100 million just over the impeachment process.
Is the money going to register in those primaries? Is money the way to get elected?
It's just not money. He has a organization. He's had a massive
field team. He had that when he was mayor.
And he knows ground game. He's very smart. He's got every town USA. He's been his gun.
Remember, no question he's very smart.
People have to remember something. Donald Trump is impeached because of Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg put up the $100 million that backed those House candidates. He takes ad out now on CNN that says, I picked 23 House seats, I won 21. Okay? It's Michael Bloomberg who literally took apart one of the most important institutions we have on the right, the NRA. It was Michael Bloomberg, Everytown USA going after them, but also backing these attorney generals like Letitia James and others that she may bring criminal charges against the NRA.
Who announced while she was campaigning that she wants to bring criminal charges.
He's backed these radical attorney generals across the country, not just here.
Right.
So he's gone after that. It's Bloomberg's organization. Remember, his data operation, the president with Brad Parscale is the most sophisticated in political history. Bloomberg united the capital markets of the world with data. This is a guy, his data operation may be even more sophisticated than the president's. And you're talking about amount of capital. This is not donation cash. This is not, $100 million is a rich guy writing a check for donations. This is applying $2 billion. Remember, right now he spent $100 million on negative ads just on the president on impeachment. So we're in a dangerous, dangerous time in American politics. We've never had a situation where one individual, it's getting to be like Eastern Europe in these countries like Russia, where now we have an oligarch who will decide in the hatred of Trump on the left, right? Not so much from some of the Bernie people, but of the populists, but the hatred of Trump on the we've seen every exit poll that said by 2 orders of magnitude, they don't care what the ideology is, they don't care if the candidate agrees with them on policy, they want somebody that can beat Trump. Bloomberg's going to offer an opportunity to say,
So
if it's not me, it's my money, and it'll be.
So you would say 50% chance is Bloomberg, 50% chance he gets to pick.
I think it's 50% chance he's actually the nominee, but it's 100% chance that his capital, it'll be president. You're going to have a populist nationalist in Donald Trump, a fire-breathing populist versus a globalist, and somebody that's got billions of dollars. And the Democratic Party, which I came from a family of Democrats, to me is going to have to do a gut check. They're going to have to really think about who they are as a party, who they are as people, to allow an oligarch to come in here and to try to not just buy an American election, but to try to change the arc of the country. And I believe the salvation of Donald Trump in this campaign, because I tell folks, if you think 16 and you and I knew how nasty it was, you ain't seen nothing yet. Oh, this is going to be all about mobilization. This is all about getting people out. I happen to believe that Bernie will not be the nominee, that they'll have somebody else, and I think that the 10 or 15 or 20% of the Bernie followers who are populist, who see in President Trump, they don't like everything about President Trump, some of his policies, but they see that he gives voice to working class people. It's those people either staying home or coming to support President Trump that could be the key to victory in 2020.
Wow. Well, that was terrific, Steve.
Well, Mayor, thank you for having me.
Thank you for doing your show, too, because
I love the show.
It's really explaining issues in ways that people don't get from the truncated way the biased media does it.
Well, you've got an open invite. We always love having you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Mayor.
Great pleasure. It was a great pleasure working with you, too.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.